Let me call up while this is happening Martin Janssen van Veeren from Grant Thornton, one of our EXCO board members who's going to be facilitating the session, and Carol Weaving from TB Reid, and my partner today, Mr. Tulani Nzima. Thanks very much. Well, the short answer to that was we didn't.
Hopefully this is not a trend in terms of how this discussion is going to go. My name is Martin Janssen van Veeren. I'm standing in for Gillian Saunders, so if I look unprepared, it's because I am. But hopefully this won't break down in terms of discussion that we're going to have. We've got two panelists in terms of the experts that we're going to be talking about the future of trade shows. As we know, in terms of Indaba has been long-standing trade show in South Africa, but recently the new trade shows that has come along in terms of We Are Africa, WTM Africa, etc., has come on board and has challenged the position, if you will, in terms of what Indaba has been doing. And Indaba has, as we all know, come in for some criticism in terms of the effectiveness of the show, how it's being run. So there is some points to raise. But Tulani, we're not here today in order to fight. We're going to keep the discussion civil. So in terms of what I would like to do is just to raise a couple of questions with my panelists, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions. But as I said, we all know the issues, but if we can focus on the solutions rather than just the criticisms, I think that would be the best rules of engagement. I think if we start off the discussion, perhaps we just go back a little bit and ask, in terms of a trade show, and if we look at the marketing strategy of a country, how important is a trade show? Is it still relevant in terms of as a marketing mechanism? Tulani, if we can start with you.
I'll give you a short answer. The answer is yes, it's still relevant. But perhaps just to emphasize why it is relevant, it still creates market access for your products. It gives everybody an opportunity to showcase what the country can offer under one roof. It can be very expensive for products to go out there and have the same reach that they would otherwise have at a trade show. So from that point of view, it's cost effective, it has better reach. It is still very important for a lot of products to go and eyeball each other, even though technology can do some of the things that are happening. Looking across the world, I still have to see countries that have said it's no longer fashionable to have trade shows. There's too much talk of whether the trade shows are relevant. And I think it's a lot more about the presentation rather than its relevance as a trade show and a market access platform for products in any given country. There will also be other challenges, such as whether you're talking a trade show that belongs to a country, or it's a trade show that's a regional reach, or it's a trade show that covers inbound and outbound. I think you're going to get into those kind of issues. But for me, those become the issues that get debated at the moment. But the relevance of trade shows so far remains a yes answer for me.
Yeah, absolutely yes, Tulani, in agreement. I think two things. First of all, exhibitions are without a doubt at a growth phase globally, regardless of the type of industry, so I think that's important. It's the only platform that you can really have a face-to-face conversation. That is still really critical, especially in our industry. But what better way to promote your country than the buyers to actually come here and experience it? And I know there's a lot of talk about online overtaking it and what have you. That is really not the case. It should be seen as an enhancement. And I think for us, we've certainly become relationship brokers, which is a 365 experience, which adds on to an existing exhibition platform.
In terms of trade shows then, and the growth in terms of exhibitions, should it be purely a business-to-business exhibition, or should we talk in terms of the general public and so forth?
I think for this industry, and particular, if you look at World Travel Market or Indaba, I think it's got to be a business-to-business event. It needs to be professional. It's about writing business. It's about doing business. I think there is a place for a consumer show. I mean, I think that's is an ideal opportunity to promote, I think, what you have in your products and the country to the consumers. But that you're going to do through the travel professionals who will actually attend a trade show. And I think it's very difficult for some of the products. You're pitching to two different people. You've got two different prices, etc. So for me, I don't think you should be mixing consumer and trade. But the industry might feel differently.
Tulani, if I may add to that, do you agree, first of all, and then if you maybe can comment in terms of how do we enhance that business to business?
Well, firstly, I think in terms of how the presentation of a consumer show alongside a business to business kind of trade show can be done is to separate the days. You can't have on the same day that you have a business to business show and have consumers on that day. It's just chaos, and you have a different type of person. You all have noticed that those type of shows that try and accommodate consumers, they will actually have the last day being the consumer day, if they are going to accommodate it at all. And that's the time when you have people with paper bags coming to fetch brochures and all of those kind of things. But consumer shows tend to be successful, Carol, I don't know if you'll agree with me, they tend to be successful when you're focusing a lot more on your domestic markets. They work a little bit better that way. So in terms of the success of the business-to-business trade shows, I still maintain that indeed they are growing, but it's a question of how do you continually reinvent yourself to remain relevant. And remember that trade shows at the basic level are about bringing two key partners together. You create a trading floor for your buyers and your exhibitors. If you cannot appeal to the exhibitors, you cannot draw buyers into your show. So you have to be very, very careful in terms of the criteria that you use to select either one of the two. So if you don't bring buyers that make sense to the exhibitors, your show becomes irrelevant. Similarly, if you do not bring to the show exhibitors that make sense to the buyers, they will be irrelevant. So these things become very important. And just one quick point. When you look at our own show, like Indaba, I think we have been challenged slightly differently to any other international show, in the sense that we try to be a broad church. In the past, we have tried that. We have tried to accommodate everybody, including some products which may not necessarily have been products. People coming to these shows to sell particular things. You don't go to a trade show and buy things. You go to a trade show for business and meetings with people. So these are the kind of things that you need to be very careful about. Otherwise, the criticism will continue to say, how do you bring people who are coming here to sell with sincere apologies, camping stuff, and that's not what you are supposed to be doing. Go to NASREC if you want to do that kind of thing.
I think because this is one of the points that I wanted to raise, is that in terms of the trade shows, are they being too broad, trying to catch all? And if we then say we're looking at more specialized shows, are we going to then be looking at quite a number of these? Because it do go to the quality of the buyers, and particularly the hosted buyers.
Yeah, I think you've got a combination of things here. I mean, exhibitions and trade shows are no longer just a sort of brand building exercise. They're really about writing business. And I think, what you need to focus on when you're running a trade show is the business element. You've got to bring the buyer seller. You've got to bring new buyers. Gone are the days where you can just get the repeat every year and the same old faces. We have to get new buyers. We've got challenges with visas. We need to go to new source markets. We've got a global network of all they do is recruit hosted buyers. And we carefully match them with our exhibitors, because if you don't match them properly, it's all completely irrelevant. And it's like anything in life. You have to reinvent, you have to refresh, you have to be ahead of the game, you have to think differently. So, I think for us, it really is about getting that match right and really focusing on the business-to-business side.
In terms of South Africa, is there any unique dimensions in terms of the product, how it's sold, distributed? Is it the same in terms of any other destination, or is it I'm thinking particularly in terms of the role of inbounds at these shows. it's about how are we doing business, who we inviting, and who we targeting.
I think
I don't,
I'm sitting on
I
the
think I'd like to
on the
have
sofa
both
with a
of you comment.
politician. I have to be very careful here. I think any country is going to have their own trade show, often run by the private sector. In fact, majority of the time run by the private sector. Every show is different. You have to adapt to a market, and you have to adapt to your exhibitor base, to your buyer base. You need to work with government, obviously. And I think, is it different? You have to adapt to everything. So any trade show you do, we have to talk to you guys. We want to know what you want. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually here today, because I genuinely want to hear what you want. We want to listen, and we want to actually provide the right platform for you. But if we don't listen to our market, we're not going to be able to deliver the right offering.
Well, it is indeed about listening to your consumers or listening to your customers, as exhibitors are in this case. For us, it has always been very important that at the end of every show we do a survey and get input from our exhibitors in terms of how they have experienced every show. And it is for that reason that we have continually reinvented ourselves so that we can be relevant. I think there's also a bit of a challenge, when it comes to the way that we have mixed our products. And I've used the word a broad church. We have indeed been a broad church in the past. And what then tended to happen is that we will bring in some products or exhibitors that did not make sense to our buyers. But we will also be upsetting our buyers who are going there, our exhibitors, that are going there with genuine products, and some destinations as well who are saying, this is what we are offering to the country. And in that way, you tend to dilute your offering. And you've got to be very, very careful. We have taken deliberate steps to make sure that we very carefully sift through that challenge with some dynamics behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. Let me just give you one example. We have municipalities that have always taken space at Indaba, and you wonder, what is it that they are presenting? We have had to deal with that. And Carol, there's an issue that it's a challenge for all of us. You're talking about continually inviting new buyers. It's a challenge, but I want to put it slightly differently. We have to maybe focus on particular source markets. And in the source markets, you will have to then try, firstly, find new buyers. But I think the challenge that we have is you have buyers that have been loyal to your events that you cannot wish away. And those buyers will also have new people that are joining them that need to be familiar with the South African product. So, and be very careful. You can't always have new. The markets are becoming saturated now, and at some stage you'll have to deal with the same people for the reasons of loyalty, saying we have been getting, if you have been getting a lot of business from the German market, as maybe the two of us group will attest to, and then they are getting support from the TUI group, for instance. It's very unlikely that they will be very happy with me dropping the TUI group the following year, because they are saying these are the people that have been supplying us with customers. So it's a balancing act. I appreciate that, and when we start, we also approach things that way. But there is that component of saying, how do we balance between loyalty and source markets where we're saying we have been getting our business from?
Obviously, it's a combination, of course. You're going to get a balance of repeat and existing clients that you have to look after in new markets. I think what we're just saying is we have a big emphasis on some of those new source markets or some of the new buyers from those source markets. And I think that's quite a growth area for us that we'd like to concentrate on. I think where we're different is we're inbound and outbound, and we also serve the domestic market. And that's where we are different from South African tourism and Indaba. But at the end of the day, if you take both shows and the amount of the economic impact that our particular show and then Indaba has for the country itself, it's phenomenal. And I think at the end of the day, if the exhibitors here can all grow because you've got two trade platforms that are bringing in new and additional buyers to what you've already had, that can only benefit everybody.
Chelani, you spoke about in terms of having a look in terms of exactly who is exhibiting at Indaba in particular, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you give us some insight in terms of how is the next Indaba going to be different from the previous ones? Why should the trade support what is going to be different if people have said, well, previously Indaba is not working for me anymore?
Well, I don't know how many people have said Indaba is not working for them completely. I think what people are saying is that maybe you can change the presentation of Indaba. It's really about the presentation and remaining relevant to them. How is next year's Indaba going to be? If you looked at our Indaba edition of 2013, it was different to 2012. 2014 was different to 2013. And 2015 was completely different to the way we presented 2014. So what we're doing really is a progressive change in the way that we're presenting Indaba. Because we have realized that exhibitors and buyers are looking for different things. And what are some of these things? I'll share with Carol, and I'm sure she also sees these kind of things. Firstly, if you look at especially the luxury component of exhibitions, it's very much a tabletop kind of exhibition. It's no longer about the brick and mortar or cardboard and metal, if you like. They're not focusing on that. They're focusing on meetings. But we have traditionalists that have been coming to Indaba, and they believe in building stands and exhibiting through the stands. And hotels have been very good at doing this. So for us to be able to change that, because we want to respond to the trend out there, we are no longer interested in selling exhibition space. We are interested in selling meetings. That's why we have introduced things like speed dating, because it works. We were focusing on meetings. And if you look at the growth in meetings last year, we grew meetings by about 67%, because that's where the game is going. So we will continue to do that, but it's a progressive change, because we do not want to make this immediate and paradigm shift, which might be a shock in the system, and people then say, no, in fact, the reason I've kept going to Indaba all these years is because I had an opportunity to build a stand and exhibit my products. So we have a balance of those who are saying, bring me meetings, forget about exhibition space. And then those who still say, I want an exhibition space, I want to entertain my buyers and have coffee with them and eyeball them. So that's how we continually do. We can do all of these kind of things that you see out there instantly. But we were not too sure whether the system can take that shock. So we keep doing it slowly, but we know where we are headed.
Okay, one final question just before I open it up to the floor. Should Indaba be only a South African show? Should it only represent in terms of South African products, or should it become more of a representing Africa?
Well, let me take a first bite on this one. I think if you look at the trend globally, I said earlier on, whether in exhibitions being relevant, as we answered earlier on, should be country-focused or regional-focused. So if you look at where the trend is going right now, you find that people are looking for continental products before they start looking at country products, before they look at provinces in the country and cities in the country. So what you're actually looking for is to be able to meet the expectations of the buyers who are saying, we want to get to a point where one-stop shop, we will be able to see the continent, or at least the region. When I talk of a continent, in this case, I'm talking about the African continent. But you can also be looking at regional shows. They want to be able to cover this region. So we are going to make one trip and go to a trade show that gives us reach within that particular region. So, and then when you get products like that, that are brought together, it helps both the products and the buyers, because that's how they can reach to everybody else. So the way we've positioned Indaba for us, and why we now gravitating to a Pan-African trade show, is because we are responding to this need by buyers who say we would like to come to Africa and buy African products one stop. Yes, it is possible to go to South Africa and South Africa will show South Africa and Southern Africa, but we decided that let's rather provide that reach once at Indaba, and we continue to expand as such. If we didn't do that, somebody else was probably going to pitch tent in Kenya or Namibia or West Africa and in Nigeria and say we can provide a show that meets all these requirements. So that's how we have positioned Indaba, to say it has to be able to respond to this. Is it going to be representing all the 54 African countries? Not all of them will come here. Some of them are still nesting their own little shows in their own countries, but that's the way that we have positioned ourselves.
I would like to ask you the same question, Carol, but just in terms of when we talk about specialized shows, are we not then, in terms of if we've got a South African show, be more focused in terms of the buyers that we do target?
I think you've actually got to look at what the buyer wants to a certain extent, because if the buyer actually comes to the country, the exhibitor's obviously going to be very happy. If you look at our global position in terms of the READ exhibitions all over the world, we've had huge African participation across all of those shows for many, many years. World Travel Market Africa is also open to obviously the rest of Africa, and that in itself creates excitement for new buyers and for, you know, some of those the loyal buyers. They want to see other African product, and I think at the end of the day we need to be open up to the rest of the world. We've got a base of 140,000 international buyers globally, and another 360,000 trade database, and we have access to those people, and those are the people that we want to come down here. And if Africa's with us, they will come down, and that's critical.
All right, excellent. Right, I'd like to open it up to the audience in terms of questions, and please keep in mind the rules of engagement.
What are the rules before I start? Hi, good day. My name is Martin. Tulani and Carol, both of you really. I share your view that trade shows are still very relevant, and I share your view that it should be regional and it should be African. Question that I have for you, and I have an opinion to it, but I would love to hear yours, is the overall demand on purchasing and meetings into South Africa substantial enough to sustainably have 3 or 4 or 5 or however many more people will pile in here for having shows, trade shows? Certainly from a tourist perspective, we see a dilution in each. And as a result of that, Tulani, you said trade shows are a very efficient and cost-effective way of meeting people face-to-face, as many as possible under one roof. And I think by having multiple trade shows, we're diluting that reality.
Can I go?
Yep.
To be honest, Martin, the reason that we're even existing as World Travel Market is because there's obviously a need. We've doubled our space in year 2, and it's not really about, how much space have we actually sold, but it's about there's obviously a need. I think there's a need for a new platform. I think there's a need for competition is healthy. And I think if everybody raises their game because of a bit of competition, I don't think that's such a bad thing. And at the end of the day, you know, we want to make sure that we give you the right offering. And we want to make sure that we grow and that you're happy, because if our exhibitors are not comfortable and they're not doing business, that's what it's really all about. But it's about market. The market will dictate to a certain extent, I think, as to what really happens and how you go from here. What we've tried to do is obviously have ILTM, IBTM and WTM together, so that if you're an exhibitor, you get to interact with the ILTM buyers and the IBTM buyers and the World Travel Market buyers. So that's really why we've sort of brought the Africa to One World to Africa, whatever, Africa Travel Week. So that's really why we've done that. So yeah, from my perspective, we're here for a reason.
Well, from my point of view, Martin, I agree with you that maybe the market is not very big to be able to sustain what we currently have on offer. But what I think exists as a gap is for us to look at a triangle of exhibitions. And I'm talking about a sheet of about 3 areas. The one thing is that having admitted that Indaba is a broad church, it means housed under Indaba, we had both the luxury and other kind of products that we're exhibiting there. Some of them may have felt a little bit squeezed in that kind of a broad church environment. So I would say, therefore, a need for a separate luxury exhibition is necessary. But that from a leisure point of view, I think they can be a consolidation of some sort there. The third wing is the business events component. So if we are able to complete that triangle and can service the market in that differentiated fashion, For me, I'm saying that is the way to go. I'm sure over time, between Tebe Reid and us as South African tourism, we're going to realize that let's find each other, let's find the space and make sure we do not dilute the offering. Remember, the argument that is always put to us, and I'm sure that was the opening remark, is whether a destination marketing organization such as South African Tourism should run exhibitions or not. And Carol is saying most of the exhibitions are privately run. We have seen that, but behind it, there's government. If you look at your ATM in Dubai, it's also funded by government. If you look at AIM in Melbourne, it's also, there's government behind it, but it's just outsourced. Until now, we, as South African Tourism, yes, we have been running these shows and we think we have done a good job of it, but where I'm sitting, I'm inclined to agree with you that there's a level of dilution, but over time we should be able to sort out this kind of a challenge and offer you a very meaningful kind of exhibition. And the platforms that I'm thinking will be the three of saying we respond to your business exhibition because it's a differentiated product. We respond to the luxury product because it is very important that as a country we showcase that separately, and then the luxury, the leisure kind of business exhibition. So that's the way I see it.
All right. Further questions?
Both of you, Carol with the WTM hat on, and Tulani, you know, as an exhibitor over the last few years, and having exhibited at some of the smaller, more niche shows where appointments are guaranteed, and you get 60 or whatever out of the show. We have struggled as an independent property to secure that level of appointments at Indaba and at WTM. Are you in a position to guarantee that going forward? And if not, is there any sort of recourse for those of us that invest?
You start.
Gee, you want a recourse for that? I'm not sure if there will be recourse for that, but here's what is very interesting for me. The success of most of these trade shows that I've been to, and also reflecting on Indaba, lies in our ability to manage our buyers. First, in the way we select them, and secondly, in the way we manage them. But also, our exhibitors have a role to play. There's a reason why you go overseas and you're successful. To a certain extent, is based on the fact that you know the cost of going overseas. And then you have to justify when you come back that you had meaningful meetings. But what do you do then? You use the diary system effectively. Most of the time, I've seen that events such as Indaba, people don't seem to have the same discipline that they have when they go overseas in making sure that they set up diaries. Insofar as the management of buyers is concerned, the success ingredient that I've seen, and maybe Carol will be comfortable to share that, is the fact that you have a huge component of hosted buyers. When we have a huge component of hosted buyers, it gives you the ability to stipulate rules for them to participate in your show. You can stipulate the minimum number of meetings that they must have, and you are able to make the buyer's interest and the exhibitors. That way, you can be guaranteed a certain number of meetings that you are going to have. So where you do not have a huge component of managed sectors, whether you're managing, exhibitors, of course, are sitting there and saying, we are waiting for buyers to come and see us. But colleagues, please, it cannot be that one way. You also have to actively go and set up appointments in your diary. You can't leave this country and go to Germany and you only have 5 meetings. I'm really, that cannot be. So diary management, selection of buyers, ability to manage your buyers in the sense of hosted buyers, and with a contract that the penalty you're talking about goes to the buyer rather than me compensating you. At least when you know that this is the case, and when the buyers know that, they will honor these meetings. And I know that some of our competitors have got very strict rules, including banning you waking you up in the middle of the night. I'm not going to mention them unless they want to say this themselves and say, you have missed one meeting yesterday, and that's it. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Not quite sure what Tilani competitor we're talking about here. But we have a bit of a different approach. We have a huge pool of international buyers. So to be honest with you, we've been putting in these rules and regulations already. And what we actually make them do is go to these appointments. They have to go to these appointments. Otherwise, they will get blacklisted and they won't be able to come back. And I think over and above that, we obviously do take credit card details so that they're going to have a forfeit and there is a penalty. I think we have to be serious about this now. And we can't always blame the exhibitors. I think they're trying to set up appointments. And if the buyers are not arriving, that's a problem for all of us. So we do have to get a bit more serious, but we've been doing that already.
Jelani, if I can put you on the spot. You say in terms of the diary management. I fully agree in terms of the buyers having certain criteria. And I know people that have gone to Indaba said they've sent out so many meeting requests to buyers and nobody has pitched. So in terms of your strictness on buyers that you host for Indaba, how strict are you? Is that going to change? How are you going to compel the buyers that you host in order to pitch up for meetings?
Well, we have also joined some of our colleagues, not competitors, in making sure that we apply strict rules. And you must understand that I've said earlier on, it's a progressive shift in the way that we have been handling our exhibitions. So, but here's what you don't know. Part of the challenge with Indaba, if I were to use Indaba, lies in the fact that traditionally we have had a very small component of hosted buyers. Just under 10%. Carol, I'm going to let you into this secret. Traditionally, we have come from under 10% of our hosted buyers. And that cannot make a huge impact. Most of the exhibitors, of the buyers, will be coming there maybe at the invitation of the products and so on and so on. They are not under our control. Well, I've traveled around and see how effective exhibition companies run their programs with the hosted buyers. In fact, some of them get buzzed together. So when we say we're now going to have dinner at such a place, they will be there. When you have the next engagement, they will always be there. So yes, we are doing the same thing, and we have increased our component. I won't tell Carol now to what number, but we have shifted our investment now to making sure that we focus a lot more on managing our buyers a little bit better, so that we can deal with these penalties and blacklisting people as
Blackmail will work.
But that's a very important component, because you know, some of the successes that I've seen is in Indaba or Meetings Africa, as the two exhibitions that we own, have become high season. When we go to Durban, the rates change and everything else change. And we go begging for space and pay exorbitant prices. Other shows don't do it that way. People bid because they want to have those buyers that you have control over. So if you don't control your buyers, then this is what's going to happen. And last point, by the way, you are aware now that Indaba has moved from a 4-day show to a 3-day show. Why? And this is actually becoming a habit at every show, except for those that are very tightly controlled. The problem has been the fact that if you do not have control over your buyers, on the last day of the show, they are gone. So you will have nobody. If you're controlling 10% of your buyers, you will have 10% of buyers left. Maybe some of them will even be gone for that matter. So that is what has killed the last day of our exhibition. Or we felt that we cannot afford that unless we open it into a consumer day, as I was saying earlier on. But that becomes a perennial challenge for us.
Carol, you made the assertion earlier that competition is healthy. I'd like to challenge that, because if one goes back to Indaba 20 years ago, we had a lot of the same buyers. What they're doing now is they're choosing the shows. They're applying to all 3 shows. They're deciding who is hosting them. So as Tulani said, his hosting component is going up and up and up. Tulani's hosting them 1 year, you hosting them the 1 year, the third show is hosting them the third year, and they're now playing the circuit. They're playing one off against the other, the same buyers. We're not seeing new buyers, and that's a very generalization. But the cost structure is going up and up and up and up, and the people who are paying for it are the exhibitors. And all that the international delegates are doing is playing one off against the other in an ever-spiraling upward cost.
I think I actually understand where you're coming from. I worked with you on Indaba. I ran Indaba 15 years ago or whenever it was. So I obviously know the history and I know where we've all come from and what have you. You know, having said that, if you actually look at the overlap between the various shows, yes, there are going to be some common buyers they're actually going to be loyal to one particular show, for instance. And I think, like I said earlier, it's about for the market to actually work out, and I think to dictate where they want to go and where they think they're going to get the best value. And I think that's one reason why we focus on looking for new buyers and ones that have not been to South Africa. But yes, of course, you're going to get a certain amount of overlap. I understand that. We brought ILTM into the country 3 years ago. We Are Africa followed us a year later. So it's what's happened in the exhibition industry. So it's a tricky one, but we are honestly focusing on getting new buyers for you guys.
And just a question in the back, and then we'll take the last one here in front.
Question. There you go. My question is more to do with quality as opposed to quantity. I think we've been very focused on quantity right now. But last year earlier this year I participated in all 4 shows, and we succeeded in filling the diaries for all 4 shows. But I found a lot of the appointments were time wasters. People that haven't started selling South Africa yet, people that didn't have concrete business. Maybe it was a good company, but it was a very junior member of staff that was sent. So for me, what would be a better or a bigger concern is the quality of the buyers that come through. I think that we're actually bringing more people to South Africa, which is great, but are we bringing the right people? Of that database of 140,000 buyers you have, maybe only 20,000 actually sell South Africa. Maybe only 2,000 of them actually come to the trade shows with business. So how are we going to screen that to make sure that we get the best value out of those meetings? For example, I mean, often you only get told on the website the company, the person, the position, and a short paragraph. Can't we maybe have information such as how many passengers do they send to South Africa every year and things like that?
If I can go, that's one thing we do. We have a global hosted buyer team, and that's exactly what they do. They clarify and verify and make sure that they're the sort of correct buyer. We don't just accept anybody. They go through a very strict process. And then once we've actually agreed on that criteria and we have a committee that sits, then we actually accept them. So it's not that simple for us to bring buyers in.
Yeah, I think therein lies the challenge of bringing in new buyers and maintaining relationships with those that have always supported you. So I think it's a fine balance. And I agree with the sentiment that if you say new, there will always be new elsewhere as the time changes. But I think the other challenge that we have from our side has been the fact that traditionally there are a lot of buyers who used to come here on holiday, to be very honest with you, and they were not really selling South Africa. So yes, we have also changed the approach. We are very, very strict in terms of the buyers. In the past 3 years that I was sharing earlier on and saying 2013 was different to 2012, in fact, inherent in that process was the fact that we deliberately got very strict in terms of who do we bring here, from the buyer point of view as well as the exhibitor's point of view. So we have not really been focusing on just bring everybody. We have indeed started to focus a lot more on quality rather than quantity. In some areas, we're not perturbed by the fact that numbers are going down. We have done that as a deliberate effort, but we are focusing on things that matter. Yes, it's very unfortunate sometimes that you have a meeting, but it didn't quite fulfill your expectations. So in terms of the diary system that I was talking about, one of the most important components of it is matchmaking interests, the interests of buyers and the exhibitors. If you can get that one right, maybe 70, 80% of the time you get it right, then we will be fulfilling your needs as an exhibitor.
All right. We've got a final burning question.
Hi. You guys have had the opportunity to answer all the questions, but I think it's everyone here in this room should also be asked, do you support, or do we support having 2 shows? And how do we afford the cost of the 2 shows, time away from business, and that kind of thing? And what is the industry's, I think it's an opportunity to also maybe throw a few apples here. What is our view in going forward in the next couple of years about having to go to 2 shows?
To be honest, from my perspective, that's exactly what I want to hear. I want to hear what all the people in this room and our exhibitors actually do think. And we do constant research, and we want to know what you all think and whether we're servicing your needs, etc. So from our perspective, we want that information. We really do. At the end of the day, for 2016, and I think this is more Tulani than myself, but South African tourism have a process that they work through when running in Indaba, and they have management companies, and there's a cycle. And because I think I'm getting to the point a little bit here, because I'm not sure if everybody's skirting around it a bit. But Tulani, I don't know if you want to go through the process and how it works, but 2016, we're going to be running independently, regardless. You can speak better to your process than I can.
I don't understand what it means to be running independently, because until now you've been running on your own anyway. So I think from my point of view...
We've been reading the press.
Let me not get into that. What I can tell everybody is that South African tourism has had a review of its current exhibitions, and a decision has been taken that we should invite a strategic partner. That process is going to start unfolding. David will know that I was a little bit uncomfortable sitting here saying, to what extent am I going to be able to converse with you factually, whilst at the same time saying, I'm not going to tell Carol too much, because she's likely to also toss her head into the ring insofar as this particular opportunity is concerned. But when the big question is asked in terms of whether people would support both shows, I'll step out of the room. Just start with Martin's question earlier on, whether this is sufficient space here for everybody. I'll step out of the room so that you can deliberately discuss. You can discuss this matter away from me. What I want to also mention is something very interesting. I think there was a question that side in terms of people, exhibitors being new and so on and so on. But one very interesting development that we noticed this year was that about 95% of exhibitors who went to the other shows registered and also came to Indaba. That was very interesting. I'm not sure if it's still that novelty, or at some stage things are going to settle down. So that it's just one interesting sample of people saying we want to be here. At some stage it's going to settle down. At some stage it's not sustainable in my view. I'm saying the market is not big enough for the kind of competition, good as it is now. How we're going to finally sort it out is maybe part to do with the process that we have started as South African tourism. Are we capable to run exhibition shows? Indaba has been running for 35 years. Part of those years, it was Kagiso who ran it. So, but South African tourism hasn't done a bad job of it. So it will be interesting to see how high the bar is going to be raised when finally we say we're bringing in a strategic partner into this equation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the time has caught up with us. Obviously, there's more discussions to be had, and I find usually those discussions are better over a glass of wine, so I'm sure at tonight's function there will be a further discussions. I'd like to thank both of my panelists for their expert input. Thank you very much to the audience as well. Thank you.